The Arch of Titus is an honorific arch in Rome to Emperor Titus and his role in the First Jewish-Roman War that began in 66 AD. The arch, which was completed after Emperor Titus's death by his brother Emperor Domitian, can be interpreted to have many symbolic meanings. It is almost certainly more than an honorary monument to memorialize Emperor Titus by his brother, since, by all accounts, they had a very poor relationship. Probably one of the most significant benefits of the Arch of Titus was to cement the legitimacy and stability of the Flavian Dynasty. To understand this, we have to appreciate the chronology of emperors, starting with Emperor Augustus, otherwise known as Octavian, adopted son of Julius Caesar. Augustus was the founding member of the Julio-Claudian Dynasty, followed by Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, and Nero. We won't go into the details of Nero, but suffice to say his behavior resulted in open revolt, followed by civil war. This civil war is often referred to as the Year of the Four Emperors, referencing the various claimants to the throne: Galba, Otho, Vitellius, and Vespasian. The victor in the Year of the Four Emperors was Vespasian, the Roman general commanding forces in Judea during the First Jewish-Roman War and father of none other than Titus. So Vespasian, along with his two sons that later became emperors, Titus and Domitian, represent the Flavian dynasty that supplanted the original Julio-Claudian dynasty of Augustus. The Roman Empire, when he took the throne, was wrecked financially, reeling from political instability, with considerable questions swirling around the legitimacy of this new dynasty. The Arch of Titus, along with other building projects throughout the city, were an attempt to put the Flavian mark on Rome. It seems reasonable that Vespasian and his two sons didn't want people to gaze at the grand buildings of Rome and be reminded that they were the projects of the previous dynasty. Major building projects were undertaken by the Flavian dynasty, with the most famous one being the Colosseum. In fact, the original name for the Colosseum was actually the Flavian Amphitheater. And for the other spoils, they were carried in great plenty, but for those that were taken in the Temple of Jerusalem, they made the greatest figure of them all. That is, the golden table of the weight of many talents, the candlestick also that was made of gold, though its construction were now changed from that which we made use of. For its middle shaft was fixed upon a basis, and the small branches were produced out of it to a great length, having the likeness of a trident in their position, and had every one a socket made of brass for a lamp at the tops of them. These lamps were in number 7, and represented the dignity of the number 7 among the Jews. And the last of all the spoils was carried, the law of the Jews. This recount of the triumphal procession that was held in Rome to celebrate the Flavian dynasty's victory in the First Jewish-Roman War aligns rather well with this iconic relief on the Arch of Titus. Here we see a depiction of Roman soldiers carrying the spoils from the sack of Jerusalem. After Vespasian began his pursuit of the throne during the Year of the Four Emperors, he left the prosecution of the war to his son Titus. It was Titus who captured Jerusalem and sacked it, famously taking some of the aforementioned iconic items from the Jewish Second Temple, which was the heart of Jewish religious life, where sacrifices took place to God, where his presence was said to dwell, and a potent symbol of Jewish identity. This depiction found on one side of the arch's interior prominently depicts the temple menorah, which would have supplied the light for the holy place, or the main sanctuary within the Jewish temple. Josephus also describes a golden table, which is depicted here as well. This would have been the table of showbread, where 12 loaves of bread, representing the 12 tribes of Israel, would have been laid out in the presence of God, as an offering and a symbol of fellowship. This too was located in the holy place of the Jewish temple in Jerusalem, next to the temple menorah. Along with the temple menorah and the table of showbread, we see depictions of silver trumpets from the Jewish temple, used for the opening and closing of the temple gates, announcing daily sacrifices and signaling the start of festivals. One thing that is somewhat of a mystery are the now blank placards depicted. Back in the 1st century AD, there was likely wording written on them annotating the name of the objects and their weight. The weight may seem like a peculiar thing to record. However, it is worth noting that the weight was necessary for the viewer to ascertain the value of the treasures depicted. In other words, they were describing the item's weight in gold. So great are the weight of these items that we see the soldiers depicted in the relief straining to support them. As noted previously, the Flavian Dynasty began with Rome in financial difficulties from the Civil War, and the spoils from the Jewish-Roman War in large part remedied the state's finances. We only need look at the nearby Colosseum, started by Vespasian and completed under his son Titus. This was built in part with the spoils of the Jewish war. In fact, a dedicatory inscription in the Colosseum acknowledges this. The Emperor Caesar Vespasian Augustus ordered this new amphitheater to be made from the spoils of war. One could argue that the Arch of Titus's relief of the Jewish spoils of war was also a statement of the economic stability brought by the new Flavian dynasty following the economic disaster of Nero and the resultant civil war. The Arch of Titus leaves no question as to who it was dedicated to, with the inscription, "The Senate and the Roman people to the deified Titus Vespasian Augustus, the son of the deified Vespasian." Opposite this relief is one of Emperor Titus. Titus is depicted in all his grandeur, crowned by victory and riding a chariot pulled by 4 horses, traditional of triumphal Roman depictions. At the apex of the passageway, we see Titus rising on an eagle. It is worth noting that the arch was completed after Titus's death, and the inscription notes that he was deified. In other words, after his death, as was the custom with Roman emperors at that time, he was exalted as a god. It was the Roman belief that the eagle Aquila, a divine messenger linked to Jupiter, was released at emperors' funerals to carry their souls to the heavens, symbolizing their ascent to godhood. The Arch of Titus is a marvelous archaeological structure reflecting the social, political, and economic turmoil during what many say is the first real test of the Roman Empire. This would be the fall of the initial Julio-Claudian Dynasty and the rise of the Flavian one. It is certainly a must-see for any tourist to Rome. Much more could be said about the Arch of Titus and the political social issues surrounding this era, but that is for another time. I'll leave you with this excerpt of the Sack of Jerusalem by Flavius Josephus. If you enjoyed this talk, please like, comment, and subscribe. And now the Romans, upon the flight of the seditious into the city, and upon the burning of the holy house itself, and of all the buildings round about it, brought their ensigns to the temple, and set them over against its eastern gate. And there did they offer sacrifices to them, and there did they make Titus imperator with the greatest acclamations of joy. And now all the soldiers have such vast quantities of the spoils, which they have gotten by plunder, that in Syria a pound weight of gold was sold for half its former value.